Hey there, 8th graders, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in because today we are going to unlock one of the biggest secrets in all of literature. Have you ever finished reading an absolutely fantastic book and just sat there thinking, wow, that was powerful, but how exactly did the author pull that off? Well, today you are going to step right into the shoes of a literary detective. We aren't just going to look at what a story means, we're going to uncover the hidden blueprint of exactly how an author builds that meaning, from the very first page all the way to the final chapter. Get ready, because mastering this is literally a game changer. It's going to completely transform how you read and analyze texts from here on out. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 5 quick sections. First, how themes are built step by step. Second, why tracing themes matters. Third, setting up your theme tracker. Fourth, tracking themes, real examples. And finally, the godly learner philosophy. Section 1. Themes are built step by step, or discovering the author's blueprint. You know, reading a novel is kind of like investigating a mystery. You're constantly looking for these little clues deliberately left behind by the author to help you solve the puzzle of their true message. But before we get into the nitty-gritty mechanics of how to do that, I want to anchor our lesson with a really profound piece of wisdom. Ecclesiastes 7:8 tells us, "The end of a matter is better than its beginning." This is so true in real life, and it perfectly mirrors how great stories work. Think about it. When you first crack open a book, things might seem a little confusing or disconnected. But just like in life, the true meaning, the deep lessons, the whole point of a story usually only becomes crystal clear right at the conclusion when you can look back and see the entire journey. Actually, let's just shatter a common myth right here, right now. Themes are not just randomly dropped into the last paragraph of a book like a sticky note. That's just not how it works. Themes are developed carefully over time. Authors are basically master architects, and they build their central message step by step. How? Well, they do it through the really tough choices their characters have to make, those recurring images you keep noticing chapter after chapter, the rising conflicts that test our heroes, and finally, how the whole thing resolves. The theme is the entire building, not just the roof. Section 2. Why tracing themes matters, taking this beyond the English classroom. So you might be wondering, okay, why do I actually need to know how to do this? Let me tell you, this is one of the most practical tools you will ever carry in your academic toolkit. Tracing a theme teaches you to spot patterns across all chapters of a text, not just inside one isolated little scene. And that is the absolute critical difference between just spotting a message and actually proving how an author crafted it. Sure, this completely prepares you for those massive text-wide essays and big tests, but it goes way beyond your English class. When you build the mental habit of following a single thread from start to finish, you're actively training your brain in high-level critical thinking. It's the exact same skill you'll use to follow a thread of evidence in a super complex science investigation, or when you need to track data trends in your history research. It's a life skill all about weighing evidence across time. Section 3. Setting up your theme tracker, which is your analytical tool. All right, here's where we get hands-on. I'm going to give you a framework that will honestly make analyzing any text so much easier. Behold your new best friend, the 3 columns theme tracker. This incredibly simple table organizes your thoughts perfectly by chopping the story's timeline into 3 distinct stages. You've got a column for early hints from the beginning of the text, a middle column for building moments where things start to get complicated, and a final column for the resolution. By organizing your evidence across these 3 columns, it literally lets you see visually how the author's message evolves from page 1 to the very end. Now, what's really cool is what we actually put inside those columns. Under each stage, you just want to do 5 quick things. First, list a brief event. Second, grab a specific quoted line from the text. Third, jot down a quick note on what that event suggests about the topic. Fourth, actively look for shifts. Ask yourself, does the theme suddenly get deeper here? Does it completely flip or reverse? And fifth, okay, listen up because this is a massive pro tip. Always notice when a character fails or pays a steep price for their choices. Whenever a character learns a hard lesson, boom, the author's theme almost always sharpens right into focus. Once that tracker of yours is fully loaded, you're going to use this fill-in-the-blank mini analysis formula. Just listen to how professional this sounds. Across the text, the author develops the theme that blank by first showing blank, then complicating it with blank, and finally concluding that blank. It's almost too easy, right? You just translated your 3-column tracker into a flawless, test-ready, A+ analytical paragraph, just by plugging in the exact evidence you already gathered.
Section 4. Tracking themes. Real examples, so we can be seeing the tracker in action.
Okay, it's one thing for me to just talk about a formula, but let's actually see how this plays out using 3 totally relatable scenarios. Let's look at example 1, focusing on the concept of honesty. In our early hint column, our main character tells this tiny, seemingly harmless lie just to dodge getting in trouble. I mean, we've all been tempted by that, right? But then, in the build column, the middle of the story, those lies start to multiply. The character has to spin more lies just to cover up the first one, and it ends up deeply hurting their absolute best friend. Finally, in the resolution, the character comes clean. The confession definitely brings some painful consequences, but ultimately it brings out a healing truth and actually repairs the friendship. So, the real takeaway here is that by tracing these events, we don't just sit back and say, oh, the theme is honesty. No way. That's just a topic. By looking at the evidence across the whole arc of the story, the pattern confirms a much stronger, deeper claim. Honesty is costly in the moment, but absolutely necessary for real trust. The author proved that very specific message right through the character's journey. Moving on to example 2. Let's track freedom versus safety. This is a classic conflict, especially in dystopian stories. In our early hint, the story kicks off with a super strict community curfew that everybody actually praises because they think it brings peace. But watch how the theme shifts during the build phase. We start noticing incredibly harsh punishments for really tiny rule breaks. Suddenly, that safety starts feeling a whole lot like a cage. By the resolution, the characters decide they've had enough and break out, actively choosing to live with limited risk rather than living under total suffocating control. See how the ending of this story completely flips that concept of peace from chapter 1? When we look at our tracker, the theme confirmed is safety without freedom eventually becomes harmful. It's so clear how we literally needed all 3 parts of the story's timeline to arrive at that deep level of understanding. Let's tackle our final example, which explores perseverance. In the early hint, our narrator experiences a massive, devastating failure at the team tryouts. Just brutal. But in the build phase, instead of just throwing in the towel and quitting, they commit to intentional, grueling practice and even seek out a mentor. Now, here is where it gets super interesting. If this were a cliché story, they would totally win the championship, right? But in this resolution, they don't get first place. Instead, they earn immense respect from their peers, and more importantly, they recognize their own massive personal growth. And this just brilliantly illustrates how an author can actively challenge our expectations. Because of that specific unexpected ending, the theme confirmed is success is defined by improvement and character, not by trophies. The narrator's final reflections completely reshape the entire message of the book. All right, now it is your turn to take the wheel and independently practice this skill. Here are your 5 steps for homework. Number 1, build your own 3-column tracker for the text we're currently reading. Number 2, find and add 1 really strong quoted line in each of the 3 columns. Number 3, use the formula we just learned to write out a solid 4-sentence analysis paragraph. Number 4, explicitly identify the major turning point that complicates the theme. And number 5, write a brief explanation of exactly how the very ending of the book impacts your final theme statement. If you follow these steps, you are going to produce some absolutely brilliant, high-level literary analysis. I guarantee it. And finally, Section 5, the Godly Learner Philosophy, imparting wisdom for life. Let's just take a breath and slow down our pace for a second. We've talked a whole lot about analyzing literature today, but at HeroesMart Academy, we believe that everything we learn in the classroom simply has to connect back to how we actually live our lives. The very core of this philosophy is that we intertwine biblical morality with our education. Why? Well, because education without morality can honestly end up hurting you and the people around you. Just being smart isn't enough. Knowledge and intelligence shouldn't just exist to make you more capable or more successful in the eyes of the world. They should empower you to make wise, God-honoring choices. At the end of the day, true intelligence is fundamentally about character. Look at what the Apostle Paul tells us in Romans chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. I want to deeply encourage you today. Absolutely pursue academic excellence with all your heart. Learn to write beautifully, analyze deeply, and think critically. But as you sharpen that incredibly mind of yours, make sure you keep it centered on God, on truth, on wisdom, and on righteous choices. Because it's that spiritual mindset that leads to true, lasting life and peace. Which leaves us with this one vital final question to chew on as we close out our explainer today. How will you use the intelligence and the skills you are gaining today to make spiritually minded, wise choices tomorrow? Don't just settle for being a great student of literature. Strive to be a truly wise student of life. Thank you so much for joining me today, 8th graders. Keep reading deeply, keep seeking wisdom, and I'll see you in the next lesson.